To the surprise of no one, Glenn Jacobs, running as a Republican, beat Democrat Linda Haney 66% to 34% to become the next mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. Mayor Kane begins his term on September 1st. We all know Kane is a nice guy, so everybody says about him, everybody who's worked with him. He's obviously a very bright person, very articulate, very intelligent. Policy-wise, how he does remains to be seen. That's a different story. He said before that his winning does not necessarily mean he is done with wrestling, so any talk about him being retired and how come people aren't talking more about the fact that now Kane is retired, if anything, he's temporarily retired. I don't for 1 second believe that Kane has wrestled his last match. He does not either. He has been very clear in that I have not one time heard him come out and say that if I win this race, my wrestling career is over. I'm going to hang up my boots. That's it. Because, look, even if he didn't wrestle while he was mayor, and I think he will at some point, but even if he didn't, eventually he won't be mayor anymore, and he'll be back to wrestling. So if you are a Canaanite, if you are a big fan of his, I would not worry about that. I don't think we've seen the last of him. He does have an Achilles injury, though. He still has a walking boot on one of his feet. Somebody at his victory party, I guess one of the reporters noticed he had some sort of boot on his foot and didn't know why, and they asked him about it. And they say, hey, is this injury wrestling related? And he claimed it was tendonitis from walking around to knock on so many doors. So he's already got the lying thing down like any good politician, or wrestler for that matter. This dude's a worker. There was a WWE camera crew following him around all day, the day of the election, including when the results came in. So perhaps we'll get a WWE 24 special out of it on the network, which might be kind of cool. You know, about his journey from pro wrestler to politician. Other wrestlers kind of blend the two together, like Hulk Hogan or Triple H. Kane, at least, is keeping the two separate. So congratulations to him. It's a cool thing when something like that happens, if for no other reason, because I think even all these years after Jesse Ventura became the governor of Minnesota, which is a much bigger deal than becoming the mayor of Knox County, I still think you have a good segment of the population that really doesn't give these guys credit for being anything but, you know, kind of mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging Neanderthals with one tooth who wrestle in a barn somewhere. I mean, there is still a stereotype of wrestlers like that. And every time I hear about a wrestler who does well or is elected to office or even somebody like The Rock, right? And that's a different case altogether. I mean, the kind of success that he's had. But whether you like the person or not, I think if you're a fan, it kind of has to put a little bit of a smile on your face because I think each time that happens, it shuts those people up and just sort of shows them a different side of these guys that they otherwise would not be aware of. And this is probably a good place to bring this up. In honor of Kane's big election win, I got an email asking, well, two emails actually. One was asking me my thoughts on Kane's legacy in WWE. So if his career were to end now, let's say, what is his legacy in WWE as compared to some of the other big names? And I'll say this right now. I think Kane's legacy is right up there with The Undertaker. I know Undertaker has been in the company a little bit longer than he has. Although if you include his early runs as Isaac Yankem and Fake Diesel and whatnot, he really, Undertaker doesn't have that many more years on Kane. You know, Undertaker came in 1990, and if you go back to Isaac Yankem, that was 95. Kane was 97. So, yeah, Undertaker's been around longer, but honestly, I think if you add up and you look at all the injuries and all the time off that Undertaker has had over the years, even before he went to the whole once-a-year or twice-a-year wrestling schedule, Kane has been full-time on this roster for so long and has been injured so few times. The only time I can ever remember Kane having like a major injury, major surgery, was a torn bicep that he had in 2002. I don't recall ever hearing about Kane having any knee surgery, knee issues, which for a big guy like him, working a full-time schedule, you know, the guy's almost 7 feet tall, 300 pounds. That's pretty impressive that, you know, we haven't heard about him having significant knee problems. That torn bicep is the only major injury I can think of. And now I guess he's got the boot on his foot for the Achilles. But when you look at all of the time that Kane has put in that character, and you know, the very little time off, I think, comparatively to The Undertaker that he's had, their careers virtually mirror each other, I think, in terms of time served. And, The Undertaker has gone through a lot of transformations of his own over the years. He's gone from heel to babyface to heel to babyface. We had the Gray Glove Undertaker. We had Ministry Undertaker, Teardrop Undertaker. We had, the American Badass and Big Evil, back to the Dead Man. And so he's reinvented himself a whole bunch of times. And his legacy speaks for itself. But then I look at Kane, and here's a guy who can play the big monster. He can play a comedy character or somebody who at least incorporates comedy into their character, which is something Undertaker has never done. Aside from those few funny skits during the whole alliance thing during the invasion, there was some back and forth with him and Stone Cold that was hilarious. But Undertaker has never really, I don't think anybody would ever mistake him for being a comedy character at any point during his career. Kane is a versatile guy. He can play any role you put him in. You need him to be a heel, he'll be a heel. You need him to be a babyface, he'll be a babyface. You want him to be funny, he can be funny. You want him to just rip people to shreds, he can do that too. And, he's won so many tag team titles and intercontinental titles, and he's been a world champion and a hardcore champion. And it's just, you look at the body of work that he has put in and the constant returns and being, vaulted back into the main event, even times when, frankly, he should not have been in the main event. And, he was part of the whole authority angle and right up until present day, and the recent return with Daniel Bryan and Team Hell No. His legacy, he's going to go down as one of the best big men of all time. And in terms of time served in this company, I would put his legacy right up there with The Undertaker. Undertaker may have been a bigger deal in terms of the WrestleMania streak and all of that. But when it comes to, sort of MVP status, and you need to put somebody in there, if other people go down with injuries or you need somebody to wrestle, in these live events or something, I mean, he's been putting a lot more work in recent years than Undertaker has. And he's a very versatile performer, and I think that, to me, is his legacy. He can play any position, like a position player. He can do anything you need him to do. And somehow, some way, for all the talk about every time there's a Kane return, oh my God, it's Kane. He's 50 years old, enough with Kane. I will say this, every time this guy makes a comeback, the place goes nuts, at least on night one. He'll make some big return and big comeback and get the pyro treatment, and everybody goes nuts, and it's like you kind of roll back the hands of time. So he's got that, that character, I think, is one of those beloved characters that will go down as one of the best that, Vince McMahon has ever come up with. So that, to me, is his legacy. Now, the other question I got from somebody else was wanting to know my favorite version. What is my favorite version, my favorite incarnation of the Kane character? Because he's gone through many phases, right? He's gone through many outfits over the years. And like I said before, he can be this, he can be that. Which version is my favorite? I will always be partial to the original 1997 Kane, okay? And the original mask and the original costume and Paul Bearer doing the talking for him. That guy was a monster. He was out there setting people on fire, for crying out loud. But my favorite period of Kane was early 2000 Kane. And when he made that return, one of his many, many returns, but he made a comeback. He was only gone, I think, off TV for a few weeks, which is kind of funny. He wasn't really gone that long. But this was after the Royal Rumble in 2000, and maybe a couple of weeks later. It was on Raw. I've talked about this match many times before. I mentioned it even in the video I think I did when I was talking about Brian Christopher, because he was part of it, that big 10-man tag on Raw in Dallas back in February of 2000. It was Too Cool and Rikishi and Cactus Jack and The Rock against Triple H and the Radicals. And I defy you, I dare you to find me very many Raw matches or Raw main events in the 20-some-odd year history of that TV show where you have a crowd as electric as the crowd was in Dallas that night. It was just the perfect storm of circumstances and talent that was over at the time. And the crowd was just, it was incredible. And the amount of talent that was packed into that match. It was a hot main event. And at the very end of that match, when it was over and the heels are beating down the baby faces, the lights go out, out comes Paul Bearer, very trim-looking Paul Bearer, wearing that red coat, and the pyro goes off, and out comes Kane, which to me, that is still his greatest return, the greatest comeback that he's ever made for all the times he's come back. That's the one. That is the best one. And he's walking down to the ring. He still has, it's sort of a more updated version of the original outfit. It was more black than red, whereas, when he first debuted, he was more red than black. But there's this iconic shot when he gets down to the ring where he kind of reaches up and pulls himself up, by the top rope, and he's just standing on the apron with his back turned to the camera. And in the ring, all the heels are all huddled together. Triple H and Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit and the New Age Outlaws and Perry Saturn and X-Pac, and they're all huddling together trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do here. And all we see is Kane from behind. And this guy is standing there. He looks like, this guy is built like a brick shithouse. He looked like he was etched out of granite standing there. And he just, he's doling out one-arm choke slams like they were going out of style. And then even the next episode on SmackDown, I think, is the one where he gave Tori the tombstone. That's where the whole tombstone Tori thing comes from. And the place was going nuts. And it's funny, I think back to that, and I watched those clips recently. They call Brock Lesnar the Beast, right? That's his nickname. That's the tagline they use for him. He's the Beast. No. Kane from 2000, that's a real fucking beast right there. Go back and watch at least those first few weeks after he came back. That is a beast. And, even 2003, reinvented himself again. Now, I wasn't a fan at the time when they took the mask off. I thought that was a mistake. Although there is something to be said for things get stale, you got to try something new. But they took the mask off of him, and all of a sudden, he became a monster again, because he would literally be led to the ring in chains. He had the black towel over his head, gave Linda McMahon a tombstone on the stage. We all know what he did to poor Shane McMahon. So there again is an example of Kane being reinvented in a different way. No mask, but once again, he was relevant and built up to be this unstoppable force until ultimately he wasn't, and then he was impregnating Lita and that whole stuff in 2004, I guess it would have been, with Snitsky. Maybe it was later. Maybe it was 2005. So anyway, that's my favorite version of Kane, was the one from early 2000 when he made that big comeback on Raw. To me, he was completely unstoppable. And I would put that version of Kane up against Brock Lesnar and Vader and anyone else who came through the doors in WWE as far as monsters are concerned. That to me is my favorite version. But what about you? What say you? What is your favorite version of Kane? Everybody can chime in on this. I'd love to hear your thoughts.